On today's Hiwatt Soundbite, we're going to talk about mixing into your bus. All right, so in today's session, I want to talk a little bit about mixing into your master bus. I know, don't cringe just yet. This is something that I was taught as an engineer not to do back in the day. I was never taught to put an equalizer or a compressor on your main bus before you even start turning faders up. I made a monumental mistake when I used to mix this went on for a number of years in my career, where it wouldn't be unusual for me to spend between 10 and 30 hours on a single mix. It just, I could spend 2-3 days on a mix, depending on what it is that had to get accomplished. What amazes me is I used to spend literally that long mixing a song sometimes, and then in the last few hours, I would start inserting processors on my main bus. That's crazy. The concept, I think, is that it's like, well, wait, now I'm going to master it or something. It's like, that makes about as much sense as another mistake I made back in the day, where I would start mixing somebody's song and I would spend like 75% of the time mixing without the vocal on, without the lead vocal. I would be mixing this this huge sounding instrumental mix, and then I'd figure out how to put the vocals in on top. That's nuts. That's crazy. I've learned that today, in contrast, I do almost the opposite. As soon as I have a very basic rhythm part of my mix-up, my lead vocal is bang on, right in the middle of the mix, fat, loud, and I build a mix around that. Well, the same kind of thing applies to, in my experience, with mixing into a master bus. It's like, wait a sec, why would I spend days, hours, days, whatever it is, working on a mix and perfecting it, and then all of a sudden throwing a limiter on the end of it? And particularly like a multi-band limiter back in the day. Anyway, I just want to share a couple of ideas about how I set up mixes today. And the reason I'm sharing it, it goes against some of the theory that I've learned and so on. But the bottom line is the results I'm getting are way better. So I have to share stuff like this. So let's open up a session and have a quick look at how I typically go about doing that. All right, so I've got a very simple session open that will be a great example of what I'm talking about. You'll see very quickly here, I've got everything I'm assigning to the mix, I've got assigned to bus 31 and 32. I personally love to use buses in between my mix and my master. There's a number of reasons why I do that, but one of the giveaways is it just gives you a lot of great routing options if you plan on laying back to your mix to the same DAW. Essentially, I just create an auxiliary and I use it as a master fader. And by assigning all of my output channels to that auxiliary bus, gives me an opportunity to add processing, of course. A little bit of like 2.5 to 1, 3 to 1 compression with a nice slow attack, fast release, something that doesn't get very much in the way. It will really help you hold your mixes together. Of course, the gain structure is critically important. You can't set the compressor up and then just start pushing all your faders into it, or else it'll just compress like crap out of everything. So you really got to get a handle on your gain structure for this to be an effective method. But, same thing with the equalizer. On this particular mix, I remember it being a little duller than I wanted the whole thing to sound in the end. So I just put one of my favorite equalizers on, and I just added like 2 dB of shelving from 2.5K all the way up. And, that might sound real harsh to a lot of people, but quite frankly, it's a sound that I love to hear, a little bit of extra crispiness on stuff. And when I then push the fader up, it already sounds a little bit closer to what I'm after. So I'm not going to be reaching for individual EQs on every channel. There's a whole school of thought that thinks that's the best way to get to a mix, but I'm just sharing my own personal experience, and something that has helped my mixes immensely is adding a little bit of mild compression and EQ and mixing into it. Well, thank you for sitting in on today's session, and I encourage you to please leave a comment, or by all means, share a topic that we can do a whole session on. And if you like today's session, please consider subscribing to my channel.